All right, check this out, man. We're going to jump into the Wayback Machine and head to the year 1976. Now, there were some notable things that happened in 1976, but first, let's check out the top 10 songs of that year. Let me dust off my radio voice. Playing your hot stacks of wax and your round mounds of sound. Here are the number one songs of 1976.
There must be 50 ways to leave your lover.
I'm just a love machine.
Let's just kiss, say goodbye.
Charlie, play that funky music, white boy. So don't go breaking my heart.
If you remember listening to those tunes on a transistor radio, you are older than you think, my friend. You are older than you think. Also in 1976, we celebrated our nation's bicentennial. That's right, 200 years of independence from jolly old England.
Happy birthday! The Great American Birthday Party. My inclination was to open each of the 3-hour-long programs we have scheduled by setting off a 4-inch firecracker.
Oh, Lord.
Back in 1976 in Chowchilla, California. Chowchilla, now that's kind of a funny name for a town, don't you think? Chowchilla. Hey, do they raise chinchillas in Chowchilla?
No.
Oh, well, they ought to. If I lived in Chowchilla, I would raise chinchillas. Man, purebred chinchillas charge $5,000 a piece. I'm not kidding you.
What?
Anyway, there in Chowchilla, California, there were these three fellas looking to make some big money in the shortest amount of time possible, right? Now, these fellas, they came from wealthy families, but the families were wealthy. These dudes weren't, right? And they were looking to make some big money in the shortest amount of time possible. Now, these fellas somehow ended up so far in debt that the only way they figured they could get out was to score a bunch of cash by taking part in criminal activities. Now, they didn't want to do a whole bunch of little jobs spread out over a long period of time, right? They wanted to do one big job all at once, kind of like the jackpot job. The ringleader of this outfit, a 24-year-old by the name of Frederick Newhall Woods IV, sounded like somebody might end up on the dean's list or something, but I don't think he ever did. He told the other two knuckleheads of the group that they all needed to put their thinking caps on and come up with a plan to make a whole bunch of money lickety-split, right?
Now, the following is just a speculation on my part on how it all went down, you see. I imagine it went something like this.
They all went down to their favorite beer joint to figure out a plan over a few wobble pops and maybe a couple of games of 9-ball pool. The other two fellas in this group were brothers. They were actually brothers by the same mother and father. They went by the name of James and Richard I don't know how to pronounce the last name. I'm just going to call them Jimmy and Richie Shonuff.
It's pronounced Schoenfeld.
Schoenfeld, all right, I apologize. Anyway, 24-year-old Jimmy and 22-year-old Richie were no strangers to trouble, right? Trouble. They had been convicted of stealing cars and were up to all kinds of shenanigans not too long before all this went down, don't you know? Now, Freddie, Richie, and Jimmy weren't coming up with any foolproof plans of getting a bunch of money fast, when all of a sudden Freddie jumps up and says, "I got it, fellas. What we're going to do, see, is grab a busload of kids and a bus driver, stick them in a hole in the ground and lock them up there until their parents or the state of California pays us $5 million to turn them loose. You like apples, right? Well, how about them apples?" Well, Jim and Richie slowly looked at each other, then back at Freddie, and said, "Dude, that has got to be the best plan you ever had in your entire ever-loving living life, man." They all did a high five and a few chest bumps and got to working on their plan. That's how I figured it all went down. I may be wrong, but I'm just saying. Now let's pause it right here for just a second and let's talk about the bus driver. He went by the name of Frank Edward Ray. Everybody called him Ed. Now, unfortunately, he went on to his great reward back in 2012, from what I understand. Rest in peace, Mr. Ray. By all accounts, he was a hard-working, law-abiding, good, civic-minded fella. He had owned a farm since he graduated high school right there in Chowchilla. He grew crops, raised cattle, or maybe chinchillas, who knows? I would if I was him. Now, he found he wanted to do more for his community, so he started driving a school bus, and all the kids really liked Ed. They thought he was the bee's knees. He was the cat's pajamas as far as they were concerned. Okay, now let's get back to the day in question. On the 15th of July, 1976, Ed was driving 26 students of a local elementary school home from a summer class trip from the Chowchilla Fairgrounds swimming pool. It gets really hot there in Chowchilla, man, over 100 degrees for a large amount of time over the summer, don't you know? Anyway, a van blocked the road ahead of the bus. Ed stopped the bus and he was confronted by Freddie, Richie, and Jimmy. One of them had a gun, and they all had nylon pantyhose covering their faces so they couldn't be identified, don't you know? One of them held a gun to Ed while the other drove the bus, and the third dude followed in the van. Now, I don't know which one was which and which one did what, but they all three were in on it together. The kidnappers hid the bus in a shallow area of the Chowchilla River, where a second van had been parked. They had two vans, and both vans had their windows blacked out. The insides were reinforced with paneling for some reason. I don't know why they do that, but I guess they had their reasons. Anyway, Ed and the children, they were forced into the two vans at gunpoint and driven around for 11 hours, man, before being taken to a quarry in Livermore, California. Now, can you imagine if you're an adult and you're in charge of these 26 kids, and some of them are off on another vehicle, and you're in the other vehicle with the other kids, how terrifying that must be for you, and how terrifying it must be for the kids, which ranged in age from about 4 years old to 14 years old. Terrifying, man, terrifying. Now, in the wee hours of the morning on July 16th, the kidnappers forced Ed and the kids to climb down a ladder into a buried moving truck, man, that they'd stocked with a little bit of food and a little bit of water and some mattresses. And then the kidnappers left, probably to draw straws on who was going to make the phone call to get the $5 million. Probably were already pondering the way they were going to spend all that money, counting their chickens before they hatched, so to speak. Anyway, once the kidnappers left, Ed, the bus driver, and the older children were smart, man. They stacked the mattresses so they could reach the opening at the top of the truck, which had been covered with a heavy piece of metal and weighed down with two 100-pound batteries. Now, after a lot of work, Ed, the bus driver, and the oldest boy, 14-year-old Michael Marshall, propped the lid open with a piece of wood and moved the batteries. Then they dug away the rest of the debris that was blocking the entrance and was able to climb out. Several hours after they entered the truck, Ed and the kids climbed out and walked to the quarry's guard shack. I don't know if they knew they were in a quarry or not, or who they would find when they started walking, but anyway, they came across this guard shack and were able to get help. Very brave group of children, and of course Ed the bus driver, a hero for keeping his wits about him and for getting those kids out safe. They even held a parade for Ed and the kids. So how were the three kidnappers caught? Well, it turns out that the quarry's owner was none other than Frederick Newhall Woods IV's father. That's right, his father didn't have anything to do with it, but he owned the quarry, and it didn't take long for the police to put two and two together and suspect Freddie as one of the few people who had enough access to the quarry to have been able to dig a hole big enough to bury a whole moving truck. All three of the hope-to-get-rich-quick clan were sent to the big house for life with the possibility of parole, which they all got at different times. Richie was released in 2012, his brother Jimmy in 2015, and Freddie was released in August of 2022 at the age of 70 years old. He kept getting skipped over for parole because he was up to shenanigans behind bars, right? He was operating businesses unbeknownst to the prison officials, which included a car dealership and, get this, a gold mine. I'm not kidding you, man. He was caught doing that and they kept denying him parole. Eventually they did it though in August of this year, 2022. It's reported that Freddie inherited $100 million at some point from his family and owns a mansion pretty close to where the prison is. So how about that? So what happened to the children after all this? Turns out the kidnapped children, not surprisingly, suffered from panic attacks, nightmares, they had personality changes. Many of them developed fears of cars, the dark, the wind, the kitchen, mice, dogs, and hippies. In 2016, the 25 surviving kidnapped children settled a lawsuit they had filed against their kidnappers. The money they received was paid out of Freddie's trust fund, and although the exact amount of the settlement was never disclosed as far as I know, one survivor stated that they each received enough money to pay for therapy, but not much more than that. So there you go. Thanks for watching this video. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll show myself out. Y'all be cool.